My name's Jake. I wanted to tell you, make this message, because if anything happens to me and any of my friends, somebody needs to know what's going on. I can't tell you where I live or my last name. You just have to trust me that what I'm talking about is real. This is a real place, a real town. It may even be your town.
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, a podcast dedicated to the weekly discussion of K. Applegate's 1996 book series, Animorphs. My name is Coleman.
And I'm Mitchell.
And welcome to our second episode. After our first episode, we're excited to be back. Excited to jump into episode 2 and a new book and see what happens.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're both excited. Super excited.
The Visitor is, it's a good book still.
No, you're already in the review.
No, I'm just saying that, the first book I was really excited to get into, and the second book, still excited, but it's a little bit less than the first book. That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, with the first book, I mean, that's one of the biggest in the series because it sets up everything.
And then number 2, it's like, now we got like 60 more of these. I wanted to actually tell you about, we've discussed it a little bit, but obviously we're both aware of the Animorphs video games that are out there. You yourself said that you've played the PlayStation 1 video game. Was that Shattered Realities?
Shattered Realities for the PS1.
Shattered Expectations?
Yes, Shattered Realities for the PlayStation 1.
Right. Well, I looked up some gameplay of that. I guess I wasn't expecting like kind of a 2D platformer, basically.
A 2D platformer where you occasionally turn into an animal or bug or dragonfly or whatever those are classified as nowadays.
Yeah, I think I watched like 5 minutes of the first level of the game, and I didn't see any morphing whatsoever.
Yeah, and the weirdest thing about that game is it was trying to be like Mario or something. You had coins with the Animorph symbol on them.
Yeah, I remember that. I saw that.
Yeah.
I wondered what that was about.
I mean, in the 90s, when video games were catching on and becoming this big thing, that was the format you would jump to with a platformer, is that you had to collect something. There'd be an occasional secret item you collect, and it'd be like coin-based, and you'd get from point A to point B. And Animorphs Shattered Reality did not shatter any cliches by following along that format.
Nice pun. Good and solid.
I feel like this podcast will succeed if we raise up the pun level. And limericks. Limericks as well. If we can somehow put limericks into this podcast.
Oh, that's a challenge, man. Now I'm going to start writing Animorphs limericks.
Oh my gosh.
There once was a hawk named Tobias.
He was sad.
I got... yeah, nice rhyme. Well, okay, so I didn't even want to talk about Shattered Realities because I never played it, and it looked terrible. You played it. I assume it was terrible, right?
Maybe. I loved it. I mean,
you loved it? Oh, great.
I mean, I was probably 11 or 12 when that game came out. No, maybe a little. Yeah, I was probably.
Well, and back in the 90s, I guess our expectations of video games was a lot lower.
Well, I don't know. The first PlayStation 1 game I had was Twisted Metal 2. I mean, that's pretty strong out of the gate.
Well, I don't think you can compare Twisted Metal 2 to Animorphs Shattered Realities.
As a child, all right, I was playing Final Fantasy IX in the same time range as, Animorphs Shattered Reality.
I didn't know that there was a Animorphs Game Boy Color game made so long ago.
I've seen screenshots. I don't know anything about it.
Oh boy, dude, I watched a playthrough. I kid you not, it is a Pokemon clone.
Really?
Let that sink in for a second. Yeah, it's a Pokemon clone. It's basically a top-down game. It's got, sprites like Pokemon, very, very small, not detailed. It's very 2D. It looks like an NES game, but this was released on the Game Boy Color. From what I gathered from watching the painful playthrough is, you just, I think you start out playing as Cassie for some reason, and you walk around this little town, and there's little animal sprites walking around, and you can walk up to an animal sprite. It goes into this pseudo Pokemon style battle, and if you beat the animal, you can acquire it, and then you can collect, for some reason, they limited it to 6 morphs per your character.
So you go up to this little animal sprite who's just hanging out, minding his own business, and you fight him to acquire a morph?
Yeah, for some reason, it's very Pokemon-esque.
How does the fighting work? I mean, do you actually, are you hitting them and stuff?
It's very much like a Pokemon battle system. You go into the battle, and then, it shows their character sprite and your character sprite, and you've got your move list of, like, your little attacks. Like, if you morph a dog, you can choose bite or whatever. But from what the notes on the playthrough said, it's largely just kind of a button masher in terms of battle. There's not a whole lot of strategy that goes into it. And, it just looked like an NES Animorphs game. I don't know if I could play it, honestly, but...
I don't know. That sounds like an instant buy. I don't know if you need to check out any reviews or gameplay on YouTube. I think you should just head on over to Amazon and throw in your credit card.
And then dig out your Game Boy Color from your basement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's weird. That's just a Pokemon clone Animorphs game. And it's official. It's official. It's not like a fan-made thing. Well, back then, they were just, they would throw out their rights to anything. Like a video game, it wasn't like a movie where they actually had the writers who care about how it turned out. They're just, like, whatever, free money.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
Anyway, so I had just thought it was interesting last week after recording our first episode, The Invasion, which you can find now on iTunes and major retailers. After recording that one, I thought it was really interesting getting into the editing podcast phase of starting this show, which kind of fell on me because I was both interested in doing it and most available for it.
And I stuck you with the work.
Yeah, pretty much. Which is how it goes. That's fine. It was kind of it was a joint idea to start this podcast, but I was interested in the nitty gritty of the tech and all of that as well. So I jumped into editing it, and it was weird. I realized after I finished it, which took a little while to get through everything and go through more than 2 hours of us just rambling on and making horrible jokes. It was interesting after I was done with it having something that long edited together and complete. Because as we might have mentioned once, we talked about going to the same film school, I think, in the first episode. Yeah, we're both heavily into film production and shooting video and film and shorts and writing features. And just the whole filmmaking industry, that's kind of our big interest and what we're trying to do. And so I've edited tons of video. I've edited, narrative, live action all over the place.
Oh, you've edited tons of movies.
Yeah, I've edited
pretty much every genre of video production we could think of, documentaries and shorts and features. And
that's what I wanted to be originally. I wanted to go into editing specifically because I enjoyed it so much. So it was very weird knowing that the longest thing I've edited now is a podcast and jumping into just editing audio and how different that is from video. I found it really interesting. It's cool. I'm excited.
Not only is it the longest thing you've ever edited, it's probably also the fastest turnaround of something you've ever edited.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to, when you jump into post-production.
Spending months.
Yeah, when you jump into post-production on even, a commercial or something like that, the way we do it, we can be in post for months and months at a time as we line up different departments to get out a finished product. So it's really interesting going straight from editing, putting in music, putting in an opening, creating a segue, all that stuff. That, in just a week's time, you've got content. So I found that kind of inspiring.
It's very rewarding.
Hopefully it will be. Or I'll get burnt out super fast and just want to quit this.
No, there's no quitting, bro. We're in it now. You and me.
Yeah, we got this. But
we're in it to win it.
Yeah, that's crazy. But wait,
you win something for podcasting, right?
I assume we'll win the loyalty and praise from a huge fan base.
So we're through the first book, and one thing that I had always wondered about was with this morphing technology, why limit that to just animals? And I think at some point in the series they have a debate or something about the morality of, like morphing other humans and stuff. And I think another character brings it up later, and I think even does it, and they frown upon it highly.
That taboo is shattered later on during a certain trilogy that will go unnamed so far.
Right, yeah, and I guess they'll address it at that point. I just wondered why they hadn't addressed it in the first or second book.
Well, they kind of do, not in the first or second book. Here, when we go into the fourth book, they touch on sentient species and morphing them a little bit. And like you said, I mean, once we get into the early 20s, we definitely have a character who jumps right into a human morph at one point.
Well, yeah, and I know that they do it. They actually do it later on, further towards the end of the series, when they're when they deem it necessary. But for the most part, in the beginning here, they're pretty adamant about not morphing human.
And we never really get any information on what that's like, morphing another human. As far as I know, I mean, obviously there's a lot of ghostwritten ones I haven't read, and neither of you for the most part. But
yeah.
But as far as I know, all the characters who do end up morphing humans, they don't really talk about the experience like they go in depth with cockroach morphs and everything else.
Well, I am pumped, man. Let's get into this. The Visitor, number 2. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, let's go.
Their bodies were now hosts, harboring an alien form of life, a cosmic form, which to survive must take over every human man. So I ran. They're after you! They're after all of us! Our wives, our children, everyone! They're here already! You're next! You're next! You're next! You're next! You're next!
Yeah, all right, so let's talk about Animorphs book number 2, The Visitor. On the cover, we've got Rachel morphing a cat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to happen eventually.
Yeah, it's all told from her perspective. So loving already the jumping to different people, and it's the best part of the series.
Oh, yeah. Multiple perspectives. Always good. I'm going to kick off reading the back of the book here.
Go ahead.
If someone told you Earth was under a silent attack, there's a good chance you'd think they were pretty strange. If that same person said Earth's only means of defense depends on the actions and powers of 5 kids, you'd probably start to look for a quick exit. Guess what? It's all true. Rachel and her friends knew they were in for some pretty strange stuff from the very beginning. How often do you run into a dying alien who gives you the power to morph into any animal you touch? But that was before they knew what they would be up against. Now they know. And they know what they have to do before it's too late. Dun, 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 The Visitor.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good recap. Good summary. I love the back of the book summary.
Well, I like to put a little theatrical tinge to it, kind of flex my thespian muscles here.
We're not just here to teach you, dear listener. We're here to entertain.
No, I'm here to make them feel.
Okay, so jumping right in, this book starts out with the obligatory recap. Now, this is, as we mentioned in the first episode, this is something we're going to be doing quite a bit, and this is one of the shorter ones. It's just kind of her talking about the Animorphs, talking about, last name, blah, 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 and we jump right into everyone in the sky in their brand new shiny bird morphs.
Yeah, well, it's nice that, when they do these recaps, all the characters are at least doing something so it's not just a straight information dump.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, in this case, everyone's in their brand new bird morphs.
Yeah, which these are the morphs that are by far used more often throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say these are, whenever they need wings, these are going to be their standard bird morphs.
And they're consistent too. They do the same ones. You got 2 ospreys, bald eagle, peregrine falcon, and then Tobias' red-tailed hawk.
Yeah, that's their team. So the book starts out with everybody flying around, and they run afoul of some rednecks, hillbillies. What are they doing? They're sitting out in a truck, drinking beer and shooting endangered species, I guess.
It's a whole nother level to shoot at the national bird.
Yeah, it's kind of dumb. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't see. I guess, if they're... Well, no, you would know what a bald eagle looks like. These guys are drunken hillbillies. They're idiots. And the kids decide to do something stupid, which they will do quite often towards the beginning of the series without really thinking about it. In fact, more stupidity coming up later in this very book.
To be fair, Tobias kind of leads this charge, as he does with many things bird-related, the atrocities towards birds.
He's very passionate about, people mistreating birds, as we will see in book 3.
So they go down and they attack these rednecks, and you get your little cutesy scene of the bald eagle taking the shotgun and throwing it out over the ocean, which is always good times.
I especially like how Marco steals the other guy's beer.
Yeah, it's kind of like an afterthought. Like it's like he had nothing better to do, so he went ahead and grabbed the beer and threw it in a trash can from like a mile up.
Right. Well, at this point, Marco's just kind of in it for the fun. So if he's not having fun, what's the point?
Yeah. So they go back to their clock tower hideout. Bell tower?
A church tower, right?
Yeah, a church tower without the bell. And it's kind of a place they've deemed for this book, and I don't think they ever go back to it, but they said it's kind of a place they can demorph safely. We get one of the little scenes where they comment on how Cassie is able to do it beautifully, and she leaves the wings to the end. She looks like an angel, and just to reinforce the idea that Cassie is way, way, way better at this than everyone else. And then you look over, and Tobias is sitting there, still as a hawk, hanging out, just by himself.
Why is that, Coleman?
That is because if you listen to Thoughtspeak, Episode 1, The Invasion, which you can find on iTunes and other major retailers, you would know that Tobias was trapped in Morph at the end of the last book, tragically. So he's kind of just a reminder of the 2-hour Morph limit. Stay in it longer than 2 hours, and that's what you'll be for the rest of your life.
Kind of introduced to a running gag throughout the series where Marco's really, really interested in the idea of, instead of fighting the Yeerks with their powers, he tries to convince everyone that maybe they should go into show business instead. Specifically, he wants to take his little morphing act to the Letterman show, which I know will come up more and more throughout the series.
Yeah, and it's actually something I used to think about when I was younger. If I had this morphing power, all the little weird things I'd do with it, how I could make a career out of it. It's always something I thought about. Just kind of this, if I ran across a genie and I got 3 wishes, one of them would be to morph, and then I'd do all these crazy, awesome things with it.
Right.
Yeah, so then they go into a little more recap into what happened at the construction site where they first became morph capable and started their careers as Earth war criminals. And
I was going to say superheroes.
Yeah, either one or the other. So yeah, and they go into that, and I really liked this one little part where Rachel makes a comment about when Visor 3 took Elfangor and started to eat him, chomp down on him. And she stops mid-sentence, and she's like, "Oh, you'll have to ask Jake." I just like that little reference to the fact that it's like they're aware that they're keeping these journals, each of them, and she's kind of referencing the first book, that you should go back and read that.
That was one thing I was going to point out was at the very beginning of the series, Jake even says he's writing it all down. And I was wondering if it ever comes back later that they ever reference this writing, that they're writing these adventures to keep track of.
No, they don't. But I think if they wanted to jump into another series like they've tentatively talked about, it would be really cool for these to be on record. Like there's something kept in the Smithsonian, and it's just like these journals that they kept during the war. That would be really cool to see come back later or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, after them talking about Tom and Jake reiterating his reason to fight and all of that, they start talking about what they're going to do next. I mean, they've got this war to fight, even though not all of them are on board. They want to make another move, even though the last one didn't turn out well.
Yeah, and at this point, they're not exactly the best at planning, I would say.
No, they're very careful about talking about this since the Yeerk pool was such a disaster. But somehow they did get a little jazzed afterwards. They felt like they did something, so they're eager to try something new.
Yeah, and their plans are kind of dashed at the moment because, as Jake mentions, he went back to check on the door that they initially used in the first book to get down to the Yeerk pool, the door that's in a janitor's closet in their school. And Jake reveals that door is no longer there. So now the problem has switched to, well, we need to find a new way to get down into the Yeerk pool.
And the most obvious thing to do is, okay, well, what controller do we know that we could maybe follow around or check out, and maybe he'll lead us to another entrance, or there's got to be some way to see what the Yeerks have going on. And, of course, they bring up Tom because he's the main controller they know. He's the one they're closest to. But Jake's pretty firmly against that.
Well, yeah, and, as Jake mentions, he really doesn't want to involve Tom at this point because he doesn't want to bring suspicion to his family. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to Tom if they find out, that he's had some involvement with these Andalite bandits. That's just kind of where his mind is.
It's probably smart for them in the long run, too, because suspicion on Tom could bring suspicion on Jake.
Yeah, basically.
So who's the next controller we know? Chapman.
Vice Principal Chapman.
Yeah.
Why couldn't he just be the principal?
Nope.
Why's he gotta be vice?
Because, I don't know, they didn't want to give him too much authority, or I don't know. Also, I think it was specifically, because I wasn't really like this in my school, but I think she was insinuating that maybe where she grew up, like the vice principal is the one who was more hands-on with the students, giving out discipline stuff.
Yeah, I think that's generally the case. Though it wasn't in my high school.
I do feel like whenever I got detention, it was from the vice principal, not the main principal.
The principal at my high school was actually a relative of mine, so I never got into trouble. And I did a lot of things.
So yeah, they decide to follow Chapman and see how that might work out.
Yeah, and then we're also introduced to, because we're following Rachel, she goes to gymnastics, and that's kind of where we're introduced to this whole Rachel's a gymnast sort of thing. But while she's there at her gymnastics class, we're introduced to her friend Melissa. And Melissa's real special because she is actually Chapman's daughter. And right away, Rachel notices that, something's up with her. She's acting very off. She's not herself. Her and Rachel have grown apart as friends, and something's definitely off with her.
I think this is one of those points where the last time we saw this was with Tom. So I think we're supposed to be led to believe that Melissa maybe is a controller. Maybe that's why she's a little off. But she's more in distress, really, than she is just being weird.
Yeah. Her behavior's not like controller weird. It's just like she's very different. She's not the friendly girl that Rachel remembers. And why would she be with freaking head Yeerk as her father?
Spoilers. So we make note of this Melissa-Rachel relationship, because that's going to be what this book's about. Which I think we can bring up. Right. I think now would be a great time to bring up the fact that this book is so much different than the first book.
Well, yeah, because the first book, is obviously the whole beginning of the alien invasion and our heroes and all that. But now we're kind of getting into the more family dynamic of it to see how, besides Jake and Tom, how other families are hurt and damaged and destroyed by the Yeerks.
Well, it's more about even just the type of book it is. I mean, it's weird that the first book is this big epic sci-fi story that introduces a whole new universe, builds it from the ground up, takes place in the real world as well. And now we're into a very personal story about a girl not understanding why her parents don't love her anymore.
Yeah, well, as personal as we can get, secondhand, we're only getting Rachel's
it's personal for her.
Thoughts and feelings.
It's personal for her because she's connected to this, not necessarily the whole family, but to this person having to deal with this. So it's a weird jump. I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like that it's a jump like this. But it's weird to go from such a plot-based book to a more character piece.
Yeah, well, don't get too attached to Melissa. I don't think she's in the rest of the series, but
I assume she gets killed off immediately after this book.
Who knows,
So after the heart-to-heart with Melissa and kind of setting up where that plot's going to go, Rachel decides to walk home alone. And this is where the series gets a little rapey.
Well, not explicitly or anything. I mean, it's kind of insinuated.
Well, but... I thought it was interesting because, obviously the series is written from a girl's perspective. And I like how obvious it is to Rachel, written from Kay Applegate's perspective on just growing up being a girl, how she's just immediately like, oh, it's dumb for me to walk home. As a guy, I don't think about that. You want to walk home, you just go outside and have a good time.
I don't know, dude. If I'm walking home from anywhere, I'm constantly worried about getting raped.
You got your rape whistle out?
Well, yeah, it's constantly around my neck.
Like a quart of pepper spray and a Bowie knife.
Sometimes I just blow the rape whistle because I want attention.
So Rachel is basically she's confronted by this guy driving by who sees her, checks her out, sees a 13-year-old, and he's like, man, I want a piece of that. And and yeah, he comes after her, but not the greatest girl to go after, especially in a forceful way.
I guess you could try running, but what's the point in running when you can just morph a freaking elephant?
Yeah, and she's already
That's what she does.
She's already a little upset, so just bad timing on Mr. Rapist.
Well, and she, to her credit, I guess, she didn't morph an entire elephant. She just kind of half morphed.
just half an elephant, for dramatic effect.
Well, it's enough to scare the guy off. Stupid, though, considering, he could make a controller or anything. Or any one of the other alien species that we haven't been introduced yet in the series.
Yeah, but I think she was pretty safe in the fact that this guy was being, kind of aggressive and coming after her. Like, I don't think that would fit into a Yerkes cover. It's like, oh, there's a girl on the street. I better go bother her to keep my cover as a human.
So it's highly likely he wasn't a controller, and we don't hear from him ever again. But still, stupid move on Rachel's part.
Yeah.
But she's impulsive, and we'll learn that throughout the series.
Oh, impulsive is the right word for Rachel.
I think they wrote an entire book just about how impulsive she is.
After being confronted by this guy, she scares him off. He's running for his life, basically. And she's just finishing up morphing back to human as Chapman and Melissa drive up.
I don't know about you, but when it says they drive up, I imagine them pulling up in like a red Lamborghini.
Oh, I pictured...
Don't know why.
I pictured like a big black SUV for some reason.
I like the Lamborghini.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, so they roll up in a Lamborghini, apparently, and they offer her a ride. Just, the sensible thing to do. But of course, in Rachel's mind, it's like, did he see me? How much did he see? Is he getting me in his car to take me to the Yerk pool? What's going on?
Yeah, there's a lot of doubt and a lot of suspicion. That doesn't really pay off, but...
Yeah, but it's a nice little tense moment I don't think anything big would go down in the book this early, but you never know. Animorphs books have done crazier.
Oh, yeah.
So... after she gets dropped off, we meet Rachel's mom, who's a lawyer, and she stays at home and works most of the time so that she can spend time with her two daughters because it's a broken divorce family.
Yeah, they make sure to paint her very quickly as the sort of person who is, she tries to be there for her kids and do all the right stuff, but she's really consumed by her work life and just, she's going to be that parent who's away at a court case or whatever,
Yeah, and it makes a point to say that Rachel has a pretty decent relationship with her father. He's just a little further away, so, it's mostly the mom.
Do we ever see Rachel's father?
We do.
We do, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'd
forgotten.
It's a very interesting plotline later on.
Oh, no. He's a Yerk.
No, it's not.
He's an android.
Spoiler.
I know. Okay, so Rachel's home life. We learned about her mom. We learned about her two sisters, Jordan and Sarah. And for the longest time, I couldn't remember if Jordan was a boy or a girl. But it's a girl.
Yeah, well, it just doesn't bring that up all the time.
No, that's why I'm constantly wondering. I'm like, oh, man, what? She got a brother? I don't know.
Yeah. So after she's home, we learn more about her family and who she is and gymnastics and just all this good Rachel stuff. She gives a call to Jake and invites him over as well as the others to talk about a possible plan after confronting Melissa and Chapman Sr.
Yeah, but when she calls everybody, she's got they've got a little secret lingo in case controllers are listening in. So she says, you guys want to come over and listen to that new CD?
Which neither of us are reading the reprint on this one. So I assume the reprint's like, hey, I got a new iPod. You want to come just listen to music on it?
You guys want to come listen to the Thoughtspeak podcast?
Oh, yeah, we got to write in. Now that we're the official, unofficial podcast, we got to get playing in the books. We gotta get shout-outs.
It's never going to happen.
So they all get there, and we get one of our many group meetings in somebody's room / barn / open field.
They get together for a friendly yell at Rachel for being so stupid.
Oh, I love these. These are the moments I cherish in Animorphs. When somebody did something absolutely retarded, and just Marco is just demanding their head.
Yeah, so Marco obviously brings the snark, and Cassie's quick to defend, and I think it's Jake who eventually is like, okay, let's all just shut up. It's done and over. And they move on to the planning phase.
This is the first moment in this book, it's kind of a running theme as well of this book, of Rachel not telling them everything about what happened. She mentions the turning into an elephant, does not mention the Chapman pickup, does not want to get in trouble with them for that, which Marco probably would have had a stroke.
Well, yeah, so from this a little session, they decide that they've got to go after Chapman. He's their best link. I found it very funny how they are all against bug morphs at the moment because they discuss morphing cockroaches, and right now it seems kind of impossible to all of them to be a gross bug. But the bug morphs, man, they're really going to be key players throughout the series later.
And that Kay Applegate brought this up because you have to later on when in their best stealth mode is some tiny little bug. So she immediately brings this up to foreshadow just all the insane bug morphs that are going to go down throughout the series, and of course it was going to happen.
I honestly forgot all the foreshadowing, and when I read over it again, I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna happen later.
Yeah, later on in this book, we're gonna get to a point where I thought that was a very suspicious point of foreshadowing, and it might be a reach, it might not be foreshadowing, but it's kind of a cool one if it is. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, sure. They decide on using Melissa's cat, Fluffer McKitty, to gain entrance to the Chapman household because, as they point out, there's a cat door.
When they get to her house to kind of scope it out and see if they can find the cat, they notice the cat door, they get easy entrance, and they just gotta catch this cat, which should be the easiest part of the mission. It's a cat. It's outside.
Well, and finding the cat is made so much easier because Tobias is he's their eye in the sky, and he will continue to be kind of their reconnaissance information gatherer throughout the series. And I suspect that's probably why Miss Applegate decided to trap him in a hawk body.
Yeah, I mean, it's
so soon on.
Pretty smart. I mean, if he had the 2-hour limit and it was just one of them turning into a bird every book, that could get kind of dicey and boring. But having, this tragic figure who is actually really helpful to the group and can stay up there for a long time makes him useful, makes him a part of the team still.
So here we have one of the first instances of Tobias actually starting to act and think like a hawk. Since he's been trapped in Morph for a little over a week now, he's noticing mice and talking about how plump and juicy they look. And Marco even has a pretty insensitive comment, I thought, here, aimed at Tobias, where he says, "Get a grip, Tobias. Don't start eating rats, all right? I don't know if I can have someone who eats rats for a friend." Which is kind of a shitty thing to say to a kid who's stuck in a hawk body.
Yeah, but it's also extremely, extremely normal. I mean, that would totally just be a joking thing. I mean, because the idea that he would have a friend who eats mice is ridiculous, and Marco was pointing that out. But since it's his reality, it's a shitty thing to say.
Marco's an asshole.
But I like that the group, especially Jake, I mean, Marco's his best friend, but Jake, shuts that down immediately.
Yeah. Marco begrudgingly makes it up to him, sort of.
In his way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we've got Tobias, who's located the cat, and he manages to lead the group to it, and the cat escapes up a tree. And here we actually get some useful information from Cassie, and this is going to be her role throughout the remainder of the series. Is she's kind of like the group's Pokedex, She gives you the little clips of information. Oh, a male cat in hunting mode at night. Oh, we're in for some trouble.
Oh, his visual acuity is 8 times that of a human.
Right, yeah.
Moving on, Tobias comes up with a plan, and he gets what he thinks is a baby mouse for Rachel to morph into to try to lure the cat out of the tree, and it's actually an adult shrew. So we get a little shrew knowledge. I didn't know. I didn't know about shrews. Or
now, was it a shrew or was it a vole?
I don't care.
A vole looks very similar. I learned that at a young age, and you should too, Coleman and listeners.
Yeah, so she morphs shrew, which, as they were expecting and completely were correct in thinking, it's very much like Jake's lizard morph, where it's a prey animal, it goes insane, she goes running about all over the place, finally is helped by Tobias, specifically Tobias. She gets the shrew morph animal instincts under control.
And here's where we get to see a bit of a kind of friendship / relationship developing between Tobias and Rachel. Just the way that they kind of talk to each other is a little bit more loose and free than, like say she talked to Marco, obviously, or even if she talked to Jake.
It's a little more intimate than you would expect from these two characters who've had very brief instances of this, but it's kind of showing that there's something there.
Well, yeah, and Tobias, as she points out, Tobias privately contacts her through Thoughtspeak. He sends her a lot more private messages, and that's, the 8th grade equivalent of chatting with your crush online, except it's in your brain.
Or sending notes from when we were actually in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she, gets over this crazed animal instincts. They move her over to the tree. They get the cat after much scratching and horrible cat behavior, and she now has acquired the Chapman household cat.
Yeah, which brings the total number of morphs for Rachel up to 4, which they make a point of saying that's the most animals any of them have acquired yet. And they pose this question. They wonder if there's a limit to how many morphs they can acquire. And, there's really no way to test that at this point, and so they just kind of shrug it off.
Coming up on this, after the whole shrew experience, they all go their separate ways, and Rachel goes home, goes to sleep. And we come to possibly my favorite scene in this book. You have Rachel waking up from a nightmare, just sheets soaked, horrible cold sweat, and she has her little sister waiting for her because she was screaming, probably at the top of her lungs. And they go into this little joined bathroom for this really, I don't know. I don't know why I like it so much, other than the fact that it's so out of place for a book series like this. I mean, it's a little side scene of just showing this relationship between these two sisters. And towards the end of it, Rachel in her head is thinking, I can't trust this girl I grew up with. Like, she can't bring herself to just completely trust her like two sisters would, because anyone could be a controller. Even this, I assume like 9-year-old girl. She's probably 9 or 10. Yeah,
well, I gotta say, I don't necessarily agree with the thought that anyone could be a controller. Well, that is technically true. Yes, any human being could be your controller. I think they're not going for, quite that demographic just yet.
While they are definitely going for people of power, the numbers game can only work in their advantage. And they probably get a lot of people through the sharing who have younger brothers and sisters, and they just, get families at a time, I assume. Because the more people you have, the better. That's if you have more numbers, you're going to have another person with a Dracon beam in their hand, and it's going to help you out in the end somehow. And they have plenty of Yerks from what we've seen. They have plenty of Yerks waiting in orbit to put in whoever they want.
That is true. But, yeah, so at this point, she doesn't know, but she's not going to tell her about her, morphing adventures. So it doesn't go anywhere.
It's just a great little scene that I wasn't expecting, and it kind of surprised me in this reread. And I dug it.
So the next day at school, obviously, after having all these nightmares all night, Rachel looks like poopy. And she encounters Jake, and Jake, asks her, you all right? What's going on? And they talk a little bit about having these nightmares of these terrible, terrible morphs. And Jake, tells her that he's had nightmares about the lizard too. And just eating the spider, and it's something that's going to be plaguing their minds with these terrible morph experiences throughout the entire series.
I always like their relationship too. You don't see that in very many characters in books and movies and stuff. These two cousins. I mean, there's no romantic involvement. There's no anything like that. It's two characters who are kind of not immediate family members, but they're, related, and they just have a kind of a cool, chill relationship throughout the series, especially when things start getting a little darker and more chaotic.
So Rachel's back at school, and she realizes that Melissa, her friend, is still a wreck, and why wouldn't she be with both of her parents being controllers?
Not talking to her, just brushing her off. We're starting to see that Rachel needs her to complete the mission, but there's obviously going to be something more there where she wants to help out a friend. It's more than just finding the next goal to defeat the Yeerks. It's this person's screwed up, and maybe I can help her. And
also at this point, Rachel is kind of the only one who can help her.
Yeah, well, no one else cares, as they say.
I guess I was more referring to because she's an Animorph.
Oh no, I meant that it's like Marco's not going to help her. He doesn't give a crap.
Nobody gives a crap about Melissa. I don't even give a crap about Melissa.
Yeah.
She's gone after this book anyway.
So they they were going to do the mission that night, but they hold off because schoolwork, and the next day Cassie's dad has his birthday party that I'm sure Cassie and their parents had a lot of fun at. And
I'm sure there's an entire book dedicated to that birthday party.
Yeah, where's the side story on that? But they finally make their way back to Chapman's house, and they're ready. They're going to do the morph and do the mission and see what comes of it.
Well, yeah, and it's important to mention that I guess the real Fluffer McKitty is out and on the prowl, so that's kind of their time limit, so to speak, for this mission is they just want to make sure they get everything done before the real Fluffer returns.
The real Fluffer.
The real Fluffer.
Rachel goes into cat morph, and I thought the animal instincts were kind of cool. She never really takes over the cat instinct. She kind of lets them hang out, and they kind of match her personality pretty well.
Well, yeah, but there's also some moments where, she tests out her cat body by jumping up onto a wall, and she notes how flexible and amazing a cat's body is, and she is envious because she's a gymnast, of course. And and there's she sniffs some pole with some cat urine on it. And like, Rachel, what are you doing? She's like, just testing it out.
Yeah, we learn a bit of information about cats and their physiology, and it's pretty interesting as she heads into the house. And
yeah, it turns into a National Geographic book here for a second.
Yeah. Once she's in the Chapman household, she immediately identifies where all three of the family members are in the house, and she begins following Chapman Sr., Vice Principal Chapman.
Before that, she takes notice how just weird their behavior is. Mr. and Mrs. Chapman, who are both controllers. Mrs. Chapman, she's in the kitchen. I think she's preparing dinner or something, but she's not doing it like a normal human would, where people have like quirks, they'd be humming a tune or I don't know, maybe calling up to check on their daughter or something. But
it's a world of no distractions. Chapman and her Vice Principal Chapman and the mother should be doing things they enjoy while they're doing the tedious work. So that's what we would do. We would listen to music. We'd do any of that. And they're just sitting there waiting. So I assume the Yeerks are like going through their memories or organizing their day, something like that, and just letting their host bodies sit there.
My host body requires more milk.
Yeah.
I must go to the store.
Well, I'm sure it's a lot of work preparing to, go out into public and make sure at the drop of a hat you can pull up some memory of your childhood or something. So they are acting very unhuman-like. And Rachel takes notice of this immediately. And after hearing Melissa up in her room, going over homework and being completely normal, it's even stranger seeing these two just so off-kilter and unhuman. It's pretty strange. So after noticing that and making note of it, Rachel follows Mr. Chapman down into the basement, hoping that he is going to lead her to, I don't know, the Yeerk pool. I don't know what she expected him to do down there.
he could be doing what he's actually doing and contacting Visor 3.
Yeah, he goes into this secret, super sci-fi James Bond base, which, I mean, he's got this door, and then it goes to another door that has a vault, and goes in there, and it's just an office. I'm sure the walls are lined with lead, so, Superman can't spy on him while he's talking to Visitor 3 or whatever. And she barely makes it in and gets ready to hear the conversation of a lifetime.
Yeah, here's an interesting thing. So Tobias, this whole time, is talking to her through Thoughtspeak, because his Thoughtspeak range can reach inside the house. But as soon as Rachel starts going down into the basement, I guess the Thoughtspeak equivalent is, instead of like static, it just kind of gets a little bit quieter, and then he's gone. Mm-hmm. And she's like really cut off, and she's on her own. And it's not a good situation, obviously, because she's a cat, and she's following a very dangerous controller.
Yeah, so she's all by herself in this, metal enclosed room, and Chapman is just waiting for something. She doesn't know what, until, a bright light forms in the middle of the room under this kind of headlamp style hanging lamp, and, Visitor 3 in holographic form appears right in front of her.
This is the first time we hear, I think it's the first time that we hear an actual Yeerk name. Then we find out that Chapman's Yeerk name is Innis 226 of the Silpnia pool.
Yeah, it's an interesting way that they name the Yeerks, and they talk about generations, and it's kind of more important what generation you're from, and it's an interesting developing, sci-fi world that's being built even as early as the second book. They also make a reference to the Council of 13, which is the first any type of organization within the Yeerk Empire we hear about, which I thought is interesting.
Yeah, Visitor 3, he comes on in his hologram, and, he's very kind of stereotypical bad guy right now. Where are the Andalite bandits? We must catch the Andalite bandits. That's what he's all about. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he of course says, the Council of 13 is going to hear about this, and they are going to flip. And as he's going about, typical villain stuff, Visitor 3 spots the cat, Rachel. He's just like, right away, what the heck's that thing? Kill it.
Yeah, and this is a test to see how she'll react as far as they play it out. And she does her part well. She just sits there as a bored cat, and Visitor 3 tests her a little bit further by kind of slashing at her with his scorpion-esque tail. And she goes straight into cat mode, ears back, swiping with the paw.
Yeah, and she actually, goes to swipe at the hologram, which I think is what really sealed the deal and made Visitor 3, not think she's an Andalite bandit.
This part's great because then Visitor 3, for nearly a paragraph, just talks about how great cats are and how much, oh man, what a worthy species. Like, he really becomes a cat person right here. This is the book where Visitor 3, I think he's going to go to an adoption agency later and just get like a ton of cats.
It's a side story. Visitor 3's cat night. It's just him at home with like 30 cats.
No, he's on the bridge of the blade ship, and there's just cats everywhere, and Taxons are just like awkwardly trying to move them out of the way.
I assume he's working on turning cats into controllers.
Yeah, that's what he says right there. He says, "Oh man, I wish they were hosts." Like he's gonna leave his Andalite body so that he can become a cat.
Nah, but he could definitely morph a cat.
I'm sure he does that all the time. He just sits in his room as a cat. Alone.
Oh, and speaking of Visitor 3, here we get another Visitor 3 morph. It's a creature called a Vanarx, I believe, if that's how you pronounce it. Vanarx?
Or Yeerkbane.
It apparently excels at wrapping itself around a head and sucking out the Yeerk.
Yeah, so it's probably something directly from their homeworld that just evolved to prey on Yeerks.
It could be. I don't think we get any more info on it, but it's, just another Visitor 3 morph. And especially, this is really important to note, is that it's his go-to morph for intimidation. Because immediately after Chapman leaves this room and goes up to talk to Mrs. Chapman about it, he tells her, like, oh man, Visitor 3 just breathing down my neck. He showed me, how he morphed a Yeerkbane and killed this other Yeerk, and God, we hate him so much.
Which that's the best management style right there, where you just have to show one employee, and then he goes and tells the rest of the herd why you should all be afraid. So,
yeah, except that it kind of has the opposite effect of really painting Visser 3 as this character that not even a lot of the Yeerks themselves like.
Yeah, when you have the most evil race in the galaxy kind of like thinking you're an asshole, you're probably the worst character.
Well, yeah, and I think that's just with the Yeerks is that, that's their folly, is that they're constantly trying to outdo each other. There's so much, struggle for power even within the Yeerk Empire. And that's kind of, why they're such good villains. Well, I mean, they're bad villains because of it, but they're good villains.
They're more layered than that. We see Yeerks with tons of different motives and specialties. So after they discuss Visser 3 and what he's going to possibly do to them if they don't find these Andalite bandits, they head back upstairs, and Rachel follows along, and Melissa comes downstairs asking for help with her homework, and obviously the two Yeerks are distracted by this threat to their lives and all that, and they just brush her off. They don't care. And we have this nice little scene where Rachel goes up and sits with Melissa on her bed and comforts her as Tobias and Jake are yelling at her to get out.
Well, yeah, Tobias is thought speaking to her, and he's saying, Jake is out here and he's losing his mind. You got to get out, And she's like, tell Jake to shut up.
Yeah, so she's putting Melissa ahead of the Animorphs at this point, which, bold move, Rachel. Bold move.
Kind of. But at the same time, this is also when Rachel really comes to the conclusion that, I don't care what happens anymore. Like, this is not cool, and I am going to continue to fight these Yeerks no matter what.
Yeah. So after that, we start to see a nice little note the book does to tell us that being Animorphs and being high schoolers, middle schoolers,
junior high, I would say.
Yeah. So we get the author telling us that this is starting to affect their daily lives and their school grades and everything. So being an Animorph is not great for your education.
Well, not until they open that Animorphs University I keep hearing about.
Oh man, sign me up. It's like Hogwarts, but you turn into flies.
Awesome.
Yeah. So they all decide to meet up at their home base that never shows up in the series ever again, the church tower.
Well, don't say that. We don't know for sure, I guess.
I'm sure in book 44 they meet up at the church tower again, and it's awesome. They have a tea party there.
Maybe. Well, the cool thing here is that Jake tells her, we're meeting at the church tower later, and this is the point where they start to get a little smarter. Rachel says, it'll take me forever to walk there. And Jake's like, well, then don't walk. Fly.
Yeah.
We have that ability.
That's a cool one-liner that'll make it into the Animorphs movie adaptation whenever it gets made.
Sure.
So, she flies with Tobias, and you get a little more of this bonding we were talking about between them. A little more sweet talk, but more just, I care about you, stuff like that. That's how their whole relationship goes for a while.
And this is another great moment where they're all in this church tower. Marco brings up, their outfits are just terrible. They're all mismatched, and Cassie's wearing like neon green.
And I like how he compares it. Jake makes some snide comment, like one of the few snide comments he makes, about how, what are they going to dress up like the Fantastic Four or something? And Marco's like, no. We don't have to all match. We could go like the X-Men, and it's just all about style, We can do our own thing, and
and I don't see why they don't do that.
No, it's a part of them. They're kids. They're not superheroes. But yeah, so once again, Rachel wants to go back into the Chapman household and find out more about the Kandrona.
Yeah, well, that's really their only move, I guess, at this point. Although I think also at this point, Rachel's kind of more motivated just with sticking to helping Melissa. I think that would spurn her decision here a little bit more. But yeah, they need to find out more about this Kandrona. And at this point, they don't even know really what the Kandrona looks like, as they point out. They don't know how big it is. They don't know what it looks like. They think, it could be the size of a mall, or it could be, the size of a pocket lighter.
And to remind our listeners, the Kandrona is basically a superficial version of the Yeerk sun that feeds into their pools and keeps them alive if they are able to visit the pool every 3 days. So it's kind of this restrictive element to the Yeerk's physiology. And
yeah, I always saw it as the Animorphs obviously have a 2-hour morphing time limit. That's kind of their one drawback, their limit. And the Yeerks have this 3-day gotta feed on Kandrona limit.
After they discuss that, Rachel kind of talks him into it. She doesn't, again, just like earlier, she doesn't tell him the whole truth. She hides the fact that Visitor 3 not only saw her, but, wanted Chapman to kill her. So that's...
Well, yeah, Visitor 3 flat out suspected her as an Andalite bandit.
Yeah, so she keeps that on the down low, which probably won't affect anything later on. I mean, that's not relevant information to the rest of the group who are putting their lives on the line.
Well, yeah, I think Cassie and Tobias certainly sense that something is off with her. I think Cassie even mentions, there's something you're not telling us, and she's like, no. So,
of course, they want someone to go with her, but then, you can't have two cats running the Chapman house, and Rachel makes a remark of, what are you going to do, morph a flea and ride on my back?
Foreshadowing.
It's not even foreshadowing. That's like, hey, this is going to happen here in a few minutes. just get on board.
I will say that I did not remember that, and I did not expect that.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe it works, and I'm just...
It fooled me!
So they go on the next mission, and this, I can't believe I fell for this originally, but I totally did. Jake doesn't show up for the mission because he's grounded. Which, if you...
Yeah.
Even though we're only a book and a half in now, if you've been listening or reading at all, Jake's character, I think he would find a way to get there if they were going to go on a mission where his cousin's life is on the line.
Oh, sure, yeah. Especially, with morphing, even if you were grounded and confined to your bedroom, I'm sure you could sneak out and fly morph or something.
Yeah, and even though this is pretty obvious on what's going on this reread, I forgot this part. I forgot that Jake wasn't, or was on this mission and he was about to go flea morph. So color me fooled as well.
Well, anyway, they go back to this mission. Yeah, Jake's grounded. They're going to get right into it. So Rachel morphs the cat again. And before she, gets going on her way, Cassie kind of leans down and rubs her back just to kind of send her off. We get very much the same thing. Rachel goes into the house, takes stock of where everyone is, and once again follows Chapman down into the basement. And at this moment, we've got Jake kind of revealing himself through Thoughtspeak. He's like, where are we? I can't see anything. She's like, what are you doing?
I love his line that he's like, so what's happening now? And she had no idea he was there or he was on their back or anything. And she just spins in a 360 in cat morph.
Oh yeah, it almost kind of ruins the plan for a moment because she's so startled by him, she almost bumps into Chapman.
Yeah, so great little moment. But she puts it together and continues to follow Chapman in, and we get a very similar scene where the hologram comes on and Visitor 3 starts demanding stuff.
Whoa, wait a minute. Before you talk about that, dude, Jake's in a flea morph. We have to discuss this, because that's one of those sicko bugs that they never wanted to try.
Yeah.
And here we've got, no debate about it. It's just Jake's there. He's in flea morph.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because they were just talking about how being in any kind of insect morph is disgusting and probably horrible. But Jake jumps right in. Pun intended.
Yeah. And I think we're all kind of surprised to learn that the flea doesn't really have a whole lot of senses or instincts to make it a uncomfortable morph. As Jake says, it's just kind of like, well, he can't really see and he can't really smell or hear anything, but, he just kind of wants blood.
They feel warmth and they jump towards it. So, interesting perspective from K.A. Applegate on the lives and tales of insects.
I wouldn't go that far.
So anyway, getting back, the cat, Rachel goes and once again follows Chapman into this steel-encased room, the secret office, and we see Visitor 3 coming back, angry as ever.
Yeah, well, I think Visitor 3 mentions that they need more guards for the Kandrona, so they're hitting those hot button issues that they're there for, specifically the information about Kandrona.
And Rachel thinks this is a great time to go ahead and inform Jake that the first time she was in a room with hologram Visitor 3, yeah, he ordered her death. So just great timing on her part on telling Jake that, bringing him up to speed.
Well, better to tell him now before he has her killed again.
But of course it was going to happen. They are discovered. More so Rachel than Jake because he's just some bug on her back. And this time, Visitor 3 immediately is like, Chapman, get her, grab her. And she fights.
It must be an Andalite because why would the cat be in there twice?
Visitor 3, he does not read cat facts at all. So he doesn't.
It's cat fancy.
Cat fancy.
Okay, the magazine's cat fancy.
So he immediately, assumes Andalite Bandit. Chapman goes after her, and she fights valiantly, but she's a cat. She's a house cat. So he gets her, puts her in the cat carrier. And this is pretty bad. I mean, it's a small little enclosed space. Can't really morph out of it.
Well, no, and she doesn't want to demorph at this point. She doesn't really want to do anything to give away that she actually is, well, first of all, a human, and second of all, just an animorph, a person in disguise. She's still kind of trying to act the part of the cat, She, at the very least, she's not going to speak to anybody.
Of all the Animorphs to give up their cover, to sell the other ones out, Rachel's never going to be the one to do it. I mean, she's the strongest of them. She's the one who would do it just to slap whoever has her in the face. That's just her personality. Cassie might buckle if she thinks it'd save a life or something, but Rachel's...
We have nothing nice to say about Cassie ever.
I have tons of nice things to say about Cassie later on. And I don't even agree with people who, hate on Cassie all the time. She's not my...
You hated on Cassie so much in that first episode.
It's so easy. That's the only reason. I'm trying to get laughs out of our listeners, We gotta jingle the bells for them so they stick around.
Rachel's in a cat carrier right now, and Visor 3 is very much like, yeah, bring me the cat, or the Andalite Bandit, and you know what? Go ahead and bring me that human daughter of your hosts, Melissa. We're gonna go ahead and turn her into a controller right now. This is what brings us to a key scene where we get to learn that the host bodies have somewhat of an ability to kind of fight back against the Yeerks who are in control. They can sort of not necessarily regain control of their body 100%, but they can, do things to mess them up and make them look very awkward. And
they might be able to, control a finger or a wrist or one leg, and that might be enough to blow the cover or at least raise suspicion around controllers. So it becomes a really important plot point. It's really interesting in general, just from a sci-fi perspective of you don't get this in Invasion of the Body Snatchers or anything like that, where the humans are still there. They're aware of everything that's happening, and they have a few means to resist.
Yeah, and we also saw in the first book where Jake was talking to Tom, and his eye sort of twitched at an inopportune moment. And yeah, basically the Yeerks can lose control very rarely and not like totally. So the hosts are fighting back, but they recover from it, and Chapman realizes that the host fighting back is brought on directly by Visor 3 wanting to turn Melissa into a controller. And so they decide that, it's not worth their trouble right now if the hosts are going to be rebelling against them. They decide to leave Melissa despite Visor 3's orders and go see Visor 3.
Which leads to a scene of Melissa, she's still there in the house. She notices them with this cat carrier going out to their car, and she goes running after them, chases them. She's just talking to them at first, and then she's just yelling at them of, are you taking my cat? And they're just completely ignoring her. And once the Animorphs realize that this is a problem and that they might just grab Melissa and take her, they find the actual Fluffer McKitty and bring him, it's Tomcat. They bring him onto the scene and dispel Melissa's distraught nature. This leads to just the coldest line in the book of once the actual Fluffer McKitty shows up, and Melissa's like, well, why didn't you just tell me that this is some other cat? And Chapman's like, I didn't notice you. And it's like, oh.
Clever save.
Oh, it's just, yeah, it's not very well thought out, but it's also just, oh man, that's cold from your parent who's been ignoring you and acting strange anyway. I didn't notice you yelling at me.
Oh yeah, and she tells him, she's like, I was crying, and he's like, oh well, whatever. I gotta take this cat.
Yeah, I got cat stuff to do.
It's my boss. He's really into him now.
Yeah.
So they have Rachel. They're raring to go. Rachel's she's just trying to convince Jake to leave her and demorph at this point because he can, really. And Jake's just flat out refusing to leave her, and she insists.
Yeah. Well, she's trying to convince Jake to jump off, and finally he goes silent. He's gone. So she tries to call him back just to test it out, and he's just not there anymore. So she's once again by herself.
Yeah. The meeting place for meeting up with Visitor 3 is the abandoned construction site once again. We've got that location to reuse. So it must be pretty remote, I'm imagining.
They make sure to let us know that this place is far off and you can't see all these spaceships landing here all the time. But yeah, the blade ship does arrive and Visitor 3 steps out and he's just excited, just giddy to have... I don't know if he's giddy about getting another cat or if he's giddy about getting an Andalite bandit. I can't tell.
This is really a night about Visitor 3 starting collections because he's going to start collecting cats and he's going to start collecting Andalite bandits.
If he can get both at the same time, I mean, he doesn't even need Earth. He's happy. So Rachel is in this cat carrier, surrounded by Hork-Bajir Taxxons, multiple bug fighters, the blade ship, and Visitor 3 is right in front of her. And this is the first time we have Visitor 3 directly thought-speaking to an Animorph, and it scares the crap out of her.
So Visitor 3 is obviously talking to Rachel. This is the first time, and it's very scary. But she makes a point to not say anything back to him. Not only does she... Because she wants to. She wants to be like, ha, you're stupid. I'm a human, not an Andalite. But she obviously knows that is a dumb move, and so she refrains from doing that.
So Visitor 3, obviously he notices that Melissa isn't there, and he demands to know why Chapman didn't follow his orders and bring her. And you don't defy Visitor 3 very often and live to talk about it. But Chapman specifically says, well, my host wants to talk to you. And we get a really, really neat, just a really cool scene where Chapman gives up control to his host and he just falls to the ground. This guy hasn't used his muscles or anything by himself in quite a while. And it is a really interesting and kind of powerful scene where he's just pleading with garbled speech for his daughter's life. But there is one weird thing I wanted to bring up to you that I found not unbelievable, but weird in the context of the rest of the series. Why would it be so hard for him to use his body? Because doesn't he go to the Yerk pool every 3 days and is put into one of the cages?
Yeah, but you also gotta just think basic human anatomy, dude. He's got a freaking parasitic alien wrapped around his brain inside every single crevice of his brain.
Yeah, but I think the scene insinuates that he's having all this trouble because he hasn't used his body in so long.
No, I saw it as more of the Yerk is, turning control back over to the human, and we don't know anything about that process. Maybe he does have to unwrap himself from the brain a little bit, and if he does, that's obviously going to mess stuff up within your human body.
Except, we do see it a couple times throughout the series, and it doesn't seem like anybody else has that much trouble with it.
Well, we haven't seen it now.
Okay, moving on.
Well, yeah, so we've got the real Chapman is, pleading with Visitor 3, and it's kind of cool, I guess, how this kind of nobody character is basically standing up to the main villain of the series. And, he's telling him, the only reason that I became a controller was just so that you would leave my daughter alone. My wife was all for it. She's weaker than I am, but you Yerks prey on weakness, so I understand it. And he basically convinces Visitor 3, if you don't leave my daughter alone, I'm going to mess up your plans. I have that ability. All it takes is one little arm spasm or something while I'm in the school, and suddenly people will think, he's either ill or mentally ill or whatever.
Which he's playing a bigger hand than he actually has.
Well, no, Visitor 3 could very easily kill him right now, but...
It impresses Visitor 3 a little bit, and he decides to, let him continue on with the original agreement.
Well, yeah, he's happy enough with his new cat.
And now we have Jake chiming in. So, what's happening now?
Oh, yeah, Jake's back.
Jake never left. He was there the entire time. Being his devious Jake self. You know him, the rowdy character. And he finds out what's going on through Rachel, and she freaks out again, and he is going to go ahead and try to pull a double morph where he's going to jump off and try to go tiger so he can help them get out of the situation. And this is all as they're being loaded on to the blade ship. She's she is screwed.
Well, and as Jake reveals, he's only got 15 minutes left in Flea Morph, and that's not one you want to be stuck in.
No, that would be pretty bad.
So we've got a lone Hork-Bajir guard comes and takes the cat carrier that Rachel's in and puts it, inside the blade ship. They mention that she can see outside through the opening, so I'm guessing the blade ship hatch door is still open. Mm-hmm. And from the inside, she can see this earth mover.
Yeah, just a general term for, bulldozers and cranes and, maybe it's something more specific, but I've heard other people reference it as kind of a general term. So just, construction equipment.
Right. Well, she can see outside the blade ship that there's an earth mover heading towards them.
Yeah.
And this is when Jake abandons her actually to finally go demorph inside the blade ship, which is a pretty bold move. He doesn't really know what's hanging out around there.
As Jake abandons Rachel, Visitor 3 and the Taxxons and Hork-Bajir start to notice this giant bulldozer or crane or whatever it is coming at them, and Visitor 3 is told that they got 2 minutes until they can take off. So not a great situation for their fancy new ships hanging out there in the construction site.
No, and this is where we get another instance of Visitor 3 unnecessarily being a dick because he's mad he kills a Taxxon.
They're Taxxons. They're expendable.
Well, they are. And I like how he specifically is like, okay, some of you get in there and get this ship flying. The others can just eat this extra Taxxon.
Yeah, whatever. And I might kill one of you other ones too. Who knows? It depends on my mood.
Well, if you think about it, sir, I thought that was kind of silly how, he's like, the rest of you can eat this other Taxxon. You might look at that and think that's kind of sadistic or whatever, but it makes sense that he would want to clean up the construction site so you're not leaving a dead alien body around.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that anytime you feed the other Taxxons, you're probably getting a boost in morale.
Maybe they're too stupid for morale, though.
No, they're not stupid. We hear about them later. They're sentient.
Arboron!
So this Earth Mover's coming. They try to stop it, but yet another one's coming. So Jake finally is able to go straight back to Tiger. So we finally have, somebody in this fight who can do something. And he's inside the blade ship and just starts going at it with them. Just starts taking everybody out.
Yeah, and, while all the guards are very busy shooting at this oncoming Earth Mover, Rachel actually manages to demorph just enough to get some little stubbly human fingers and unlock the cat cage and remorph Cat and quickly run out and escape.
Yeah, and this is when we get another member of the Jake Tom family just jumping at Visitor 3 randomly. Just the smartest thing that they could think to do is just try to tackle Visitor 3. This is the third attempt.
Yeah, there's definitely more going for him this time. And, he's really excited to get some payback on Visitor 3 from what happened last time.
Visitor 3 goes to a 20-foot tall rock monster morph that he was just, keeping for a special occasion, which that seems to be his go-to plan is, something bad is happening. Let's go to the tallest, biggest creature I can that can, mess things up.
Yeah, he, again, just doesn't really show a lot of forethought and strategy with his morphs. I think Visitor 3 is a little morph happy.
And granted, this time he's not even up against an elephant. There's a house cat and then a slightly larger cat running around. And so he takes the time to morph to this 20-foot tall, useless creature and starts throwing rocks at everything. Just bounding around. He's taking out Hork-Bajir left and right, it says.
Now, wait a minute. When they describe this in the book, they say it's kind of like a 20-foot tall rock monster with 2 arms. They mentioned that. Were you also imagining the rock titan from Disney's Hercules movie?
No. I was picturing the rock monster from Galaxy Quest, except with a tiny little head.
Oh, yeah. I guess that could work too.
Yeah. So something like that, kind of really a pretty classic sci-fi trope, some rock monster running around.
Yeah, everyone's going to substitute their own image, but
then we get a great moment where she is running away in cat morph and about to get caught by him until one of the Earth Movers that Marco or Cassie, whoever's running around starting these things up, it slams into a bug fighter, blows it up, because that's how those things work probably.
Yeah, well, any little bulldozer that runs into a bug fighter apparently can destroy it.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it blows it up to the point where it distracts and possibly hurts Visitor 3 in this giant rock morph. So, like, man, if somebody's leaning on one of those things, does he just, like, combust? Like, what's the sensitivity on that?
I don't know.
Yeah, those are not well designed. They're the laughing stock of the galaxy spaceships. We get a cool scene where Rachel and Catmorph is running away. The whole book has kind of been going into these scenes of her in gymnastics and gracefulness as a cat and everything. And we get one more little action beat of her jumping through this hole in a wall and being caught by Tobias in a very gymnastic-esque move.
I kind of glossed over that. I guess I never really, I didn't even catch on to that.
Yeah.
I just had, Cassie's running and then Tobias kind of airlifts her to safety. Did I say Cassie? I meant Rachel.
You did say Cassie.
Well, Cassie and Horse Morph
is picked up by Tobias and flown into safety.
Yeah, totally. No, Rachel is airlifted to safety by Tobias, and the red-tailed hawk can't necessarily lift a cat for very long, but it's long enough for them to escape, and everybody else gets away safely too.
And in a scene that we'll see a couple times throughout the series, or at least things that are similar to it, we have one character secretly reaching out to another one. Basically, the next day at school, Rachel leaves a note in Melissa's locker. And you want to tell us what that says?
She leaves a note for Melissa that says, "Melissa, your father loves you more than you will ever know, and more than he can ever show you. Signed, someone who knows." And she printed it out on her word processor, so she wouldn't recognize the handwriting.
Oh, of course. And Marco, we get our obligatory Marco comment about how they barely made it, and Jake is upbeat for some reason because he's leading an awesome team of changing teenagers, and and they start talking about next time, and Marco's like, "Next time, what?" And Tobias gets his hero speech at the end where he says, "There will be a next time. There will be a next time until the Andalites return.
We will fight them on the beaches, and we will fight them in the jungles." Yeah, well, basically, it's just a continuation of more of these characters deciding that, they have to fight. And right now, it's kind of only Marco who's in opposition to that.
Kind of. Well, I mean, I like how these first few books are going one by one, giving them each individually a reason to fight. And Jake got his, he's got Tom. Rachel has her friend Melissa, which it's not really about Melissa. It really just gave her more of a perspective.
Yeah. Oh, what it did was kind of solidify her hatred for the Yeerks.
Yeah.
Where she witnessed firsthand. It wasn't even like she, just saw some random family. Like, it affects her personally. This is like her best friend, or used to be her best friend.
Yeah.
So it really gives her a personal stake in it.
And I think she was more affected by finding out that Chapman became a voluntary host to save his daughter than anything Melissa was going through, really.
Probably influenced her decision a bit.
And I guess Cassie, her reason at this point is just, she likes Jake, so she's just hanging out.
Yeah, totally. She's like, I'll fight this alien empire if I can get a kiss.
I mean, I've got a barn, so I guess we could have our meetings there. Is that what I'm contributing?
No, she's the group Pokedex. Or should we call her the Anidex?
We're not calling anyone that. Nothing.
It's sticking. Make it stick, listeners.
I'm cutting out all your Pokedex references.
No!
So now we're going to move into our reviews of this book, our individual thoughts on its quality and the writing and just the overall plot and story. So you want to start us out with that?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to really say about it. It's a good book. It's a good Animorphs book, even. It doesn't necessarily further the overall plot entirely, but it's a good second book. It's definitely a strong entry into the series. The characters are learning, they're advancing with their abilities, and more of them are coming around to the idea of fighting. We're starting to see the character development between everybody. It's an essential book in that regard. As far as overall necessity to the Animorphs plotline, probably not the most important book, but I don't know. I liked it.
What's your rating?
My rating? Oh yeah, 4 Catmorphs is what this book gets. It would have been 5 in terms of quality, I guess, but just the fact that it's not 100% necessary to the overall plot line, just give me a 4. It's a good book, but not necessary.
Yeah, I think 4 is a little high, but I like this book. I like it a lot. It's really good. Really good setup as a second book. It changes kind of the personality of the books and what they're trying to do. It has a few moments that are necessary to the series and the overall plot and moving us forward, and really learning more about the Yeerks and learning about their physiology and what they can do and what they're more about as far as their physical forms. So all of that's really interesting. Although the overall plot, I gotta take some points away because it's just kind of repeating itself a few times. It's meandering a little bit. It's not incredibly interesting until we get to some of those mythology points. Visitor 3 is really, really simply written in this one. I mean, he has no character whatsoever for the most part. And the crew themselves, the Animorphs, they're good, and you have some great dialogue moments between them, with Marco being insensitive and foreshadowing to the Tobias stuff we're going to get so heartily in the next book. But overall, it's not one that I jump to reread unless I'm doing like a full reread of the series or something. So for my rating, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a 3 out of 5 balance beams.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's the rating I choose this time. But yeah, I just didn't think it held up to like some of the better ones, and maybe you're a little more forgiving and just hand out those 4 out of 5s like crazy. But
I'm just thinking of my my iTunes music list and how quick I am to give everything 4 and 5 stars there.
No, it's definitely a good book, and we got to hold on to these K. Applegate written ones for as long as we can.
Oh, that's true. Cherish them.
I mean, it's a great book, but I want to be a little more, I don't know, unforgiving with my score, just so that when I give out that 5 out of 5, when I give those out, I'd like it to be more rare. So that's my grading scale. That's how I'm going with it.
Dude, you gave the first book a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, absolutely deserved it.
The book is I think a good book, but if you've already read the Animorphs series, you would not necessarily need to read this book on a reread through of the series. If you have not read the Animorphs series yet, of course, read number 2, because it's a good book and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, and it does have too much vital information that you need later on. So definitely a good book. I'm not saying it's average with a 3 out of 5. I think that's just my standard good rating. So anyway, so that's book number 2, The Visitor.
In the can.
Hopefully we'll have some emails in the next episode to read at this time and kind of see how you weigh in. So if you're looking forward to the next book review as much as we are, go ahead and send us your reviews of that one, and we'll let you chime in at the end of it, and you'll be a part of the show. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, I remember book 3 being one of the really good ones, so I'm pretty excited about that, and I hope that we actually start getting some, comments on the overall podcast.
Yeah, so thanks for listening to Thoughtspeak. Join us next week when we review Book 3, The Encounter. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow the show by liking our Facebook or following us on Twitter @MorphCast. You can send us your questions or comments by emailing thoughtspeakcast@gmail.com. Rate the show on iTunes so more people can find out about it and join the conversation. So thanks again for listening in, and we can't wait to talk to you next week.
Yeah!